Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I am Aaron, and this is the Inclusive Dad podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me in exploring ways we can create a more inclusive world together. You are important, you matter, and you can make a difference. Today, my guest is Lila Low-Beinart. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Why don't you just start us off by telling me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. I'm a psychotherapist, a neurodiversity educator, and I run a therapy practice and training practice. I'm neurodivergent myself, and so I work with my clients from a deep neurodiversity affirming perspective where I really get their experience from personal experience. And then when I'm teaching and training and doing custom presentations and workshops, I'm coming from a neurodiversity affirming approach to really help people to understand how can we basically be more accepting, affirming, and kind to neurodivergent people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. What is your definition of inclusion?
Yeah. Um, I would say my definition of inclusion has maybe two parts. The first part being like understanding, like needing to understand someone's experience first and really get it. Because without that, you can't actually be inclusive of someone because you don't know what being inclusive would look like for that particular person. So, first understanding, and then the inclusion being like full inclusion, including action. So, I need to actively, create a curb cut on this pavement so that someone in a wheelchair can move around. I need to like allow other forms of communication, like assisted devices, in order to create an inclusive space where an autistic person can feel belonging and get their needs met. So, yeah.
Great definition. Thank you. How did your own lived experience with neurodiversity shape your path to becoming a psychotherapist?
Yeah, so I love this story. So I went to grad school. I just found out I was autistic. I was diagnosed autistic in my mid-20s. And I was Buddhist. I went to a Buddhist university, so I have a degree in Buddhist psychology and contemplative psychotherapy, which I find to be really helpful in the neurodiversity affirming space. So I was there. I was doing my internship. That's my third year of grad school. And at the end of my internship, my supervisor was like, "So you're going to be working with neurodivergent people, right?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I am." So she basically told me what my specialty was going to be, but
Mhm.
because she really got me and she was right. And I hadn't even thought about it till that moment. But from that moment on, that is all I was going to do.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So you said you weren't diagnosed till your 20s, you said?
Hmm. Yeah.
Did you, so growing up, was there anything looking back that maybe would have pointed to it that you just didn't recognize sooner or?
Yeah. Like getting my autism diagnosis, I had to like look back on my whole life and rewrite the whole story of my life from I was broken or I was something wrong with me to I'm different. And these were different ways that I was showing up compared to other people and different, not wrong. And I see that in a lot of the clients that I work with. Once they get an autism diagnosis or a neurodivergence diagnosis, we get to look back and figure out different, not wrong. I'm very lucky though. I'm also gifted, and I grew up in New York City, and I went to a school where we didn't get grades, and everyone in this school, this private school, was very gifted. And so there was a lot of also autistic or ADHD people around me. So I had a group of friends, and I don't think we knew, but now a lot of us have neurodivergent diagnoses.
Yeah,
And a lot of the people in the school have neurodivergent diagnoses. So I didn't experience that lack of belonging that a lot of neurodivergent people do in their schools. So I just
yeah,
feel really grateful for that.
that's interesting. So you're saying kind of, I mean, just there's so many people, I mean, that was just kind of the population of the school, so you just didn't think it was different, kind of? It was just normal?
Yeah. I was still more different than a lot of the people there.
Okay,
But it wasn't like if I'd been in a regular school, I would have
right.
been like
Yeah,
really far. And
yeah,
here I was just like,
just a
pretty
little bit.
different. Yeah.
it wasn't as noticeable, maybe is what you're saying. Like as it would have been. Yeah.
Yeah, like a lot of the autistic traits that I have, you know, I'm a high masking autistic person, so I was already masking a lot by the time I got to school, so they were less
Sure.
noticeable for that reason, but they were also just less noticeable because there were a lot of other people around who had some autistic traits or ADHD traits. Yeah.
Yeah. So are you still Buddhist or?
Yep, I'm still Buddhist. I meditate every morning. Was
Okay.
planning to go on a retreat this weekend, but unfortunately, the person who's leading it, his wife broke her wrist, and he has to
Oh.
stay with her while she gets surgery. So yeah, but I'm doing a 3-week solo retreat at the end of the year. So I'll be by myself for 3 weeks, meditating about 8 to 10 hours a day, and it's a big part of how I take care of myself and show up as a therapist and a teacher.
What I'm not familiar really with. I mean, I know who Buddha is, kind of, but like, how does the Buddhist? Is it a faith? How does the
Good question.
Buddhist faith? How does that? How do they view people that are neurodivergent?
Yeah, so this is the reason that I love being a contemplative therapist. So I bring in like secularized Buddhist psychology to my work as a therapist.
Sure.
And just in general, what Buddhist psychology believes is that all people have this inherent wisdom or inherent goodness or health. You can't
Sure.
really put a word to it because it's not a concept, but we try to approach it like pointing a finger at what the experience is that we all have. And Buddhist psychology and I believe that this can never be destroyed. It's always there, but it can get covered up by things like trauma, by things like
Mhm.
internalized or externalized ableism, capitalism, racism, and so I see my role as a therapist and also just as a human being and as a friend in this world,
Mhm.
and as a teacher to help people uncover that basic wisdom that they have. So I act more as like a guide than as someone who's going to come in and like fix a person. So
Sure.
you can see how it's really compatible with neurodiversity affirming therapy, which also says there's nothing wrong with neurodivergent people. We're just helping someone learn how to thrive in a world built for neurotypical people.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining that. I grew up Baptist, so I'm not familiar with that stuff. So I appreciate you answering that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's one of those things where you like hear words like that where it's you kind of roughly know what it is until you meet somebody that can explain it, and then it's like, oh yeah, thank you. That makes more sense now.
Yeah, yeah. And I've had my
Oh
practice, practice the spiel
yeah,
so I can say it as quickly
spiel.
as possible. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So was your family? Were you like your parents Buddhist? Is that how you became Buddhist, or how did that go?
I would say my mom was interested in Buddhism and she was doing
Yeah.
meditation and she would like do Pema Chodron's guided meditations a lot. I actually, I was very turned off by Buddhism from that because I remember Pema Chodron did one where you imagine pricking yourself and like the blood that comes out and you do a meditation on that. And I was like, this sounds horrible. Why would anyone do this type of
Right.
meditation? So it took
Yeah.
me till like my early 20s till I got into
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Interesting. You believe that a neurodiversity affirming approach is more about healing trauma than fixing people? Can you expand on that? You might have explained a little bit, but maybe go into more
Yeah,
depth.
for sure. Yeah. So I see my role as a neurodiversity affirming therapist is basically doing trauma work. So the people who come
Right.
into my office, come in feeling like they're broken, like there's something wrong with them. Um, and there's a lot of shame around that. There's a lot of feelings of lack of belonging. And oftentimes like a lot of freeze energy, like I'm just gonna like not really move, not really be seen by anyone, or a lot of anger. Just I'm really angry that this is how I feel every day and that people aren't seeing me for who I am and making all these assumptions about, what my behavior means to them instead of getting curious, what's it like for me? What am I trying to say? What's my internal world like? And so, I'm there building relationships with people, being like, I see you, which is trauma work in and of itself because it's a reparative experience. It's like a lot of people don't see you, but I'm going to see you here. Um, and then we're doing the trauma work of again just shifting from that there's something broken about you to you're just different. And in this capitalist and ableist world, when you're not able to be productive or quote normal, sorry about that, in the ways that are expected of you, then you're considered deficient in some way, because guess what? Your work can't be extracted to make someone
Yeah.
else money. And that's a trauma as well.
Yeah. So did you start out like working in at a normal like therapy clinic and then went out on your own, or how did that go?
Yeah. So, just to go back a little bit, I graduated with a
Yeah.
chemistry degree and I became a pharmaceutical chemist for 4 years.
Okay.
So that's how I started. And then
Yeah.
I left that job, even though I really loved it, and I became what's known as a Dharma bum. I was just living, volunteering at a Dharma center, meditating, coordinating retreats. And then, yeah, I went to therapy school, and I'm also very lucky so my internship was the perfect fit for me because my supervisor was also gifted and was like neurodivergent in that way. So she could really see me. And then when I graduated, there was not a single practice. So this was early 2020s, not a single neurodiversity-affirming group practice in the entire Front Range of Colorado. I mean, as far as I could tell, in all of Colorado either. And so I found David Muir of Neurodiverse Counseling Services, who's in Arizona, and he actually got his license in Colorado, so that me and a colleague of mine, we could found the first group practice, a branch of his practice on the Front Range to start offering neurodiversity affirming care. And that's how I started. And then he kicked me out of the nest one day, was like, "You're ready, go start your private practice."
Yeah, that's very interesting. So is there more neurodiverse affirming practices around, really?
There is a lot. It's really exploded in the last few years, especially as people are recognizing they're neurodivergent outside of that, like stereotypical cis, white, middle class boy or man that used to get the diagnosis. And we're like, oh my gosh, women and genderqueer people and BIPOC people like are
Yeah.
autistic too, are neurodivergent too. And there's
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of need for therapy now in this area, and people are rising to meet the need. There's a lot of amazing neurodivergent therapists in particular who have really bolstered me and supported me and created a community where, we do therapy differently than neurotypical therapists working with neurotypical people. And so having that community, we've really been developing what are the cutting edge approaches to working with this population that's actually going to help them heal and live more thriving lives.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Do you guys have is there like an association that you can belong to, or you guys go to have like share what works, what doesn't work, go to conferences and learn more stuff together?
Yeah, there's no like kind of official organizations yet, but
Hmm.
there's a lot of like things that are getting close to that, as the community is
Sure.
building. And like there's a neurodivergent therapist networking group that I'm the vice president of in Colorado. And then I run a neurodivergent consult group for therapists trained in a particular modality called TIST, trauma informed stabilization treatment, which I find really helpful for neurodivergent people. And so then we're just, meeting once a month and like figuring out how do we adapt this modality to neurodivergent people, what works, what doesn't. So we're just, continually becoming better clinicians.
Yes. So so I have a daughter, Cecilia. She's she just had a birthday, so now she's 20. She's 23. Diagnosed with cerebral palsy and epilepsy. So didn't know anything about any of this stuff before she was born. Now, obviously, know a lot of in the trenches with a lot of it. My day job, I work at a human services organization. I've done like in-home adult rehabilitation, ARMS we call it in Minnesota. Now I just started a new role as co-facilitating DBT groups with therapists, skills groups. How neurodivergent affirming is like DBT, or is it there ways to do that to be more neurodiverse affirming?
Yeah, great question. And sounds like a cool transition and a new exploration. Yeah,
Yeah.
DBT can be affirming. It there's some modalities that are harder to make affirming and some that are really easy to make affirming. And I'd say DBT is kind of in the middle.
Sure.
Um, and so it's really about if someone has difficulty with some of the DBT tasks, like figuring out a way, how can we still help you with this? that makes sense for your brain and your body without pathologizing them and saying like, oh, you're not trying hard enough, you're not doing the work. If you can really tell this person is trying, but it just isn't working for them.
Yeah, that's great. What is the most common mistake you see clinicians make when working with neurodivergent clients?
Yes. So I've had a lot of clients come into my office after working with therapists that unfortunately a lot of them are trying their best. Most therapists are trying their best.
Yeah.
But they're seeing the traits of being neurodivergent as things to be fixed. Um, and so what ends up happening for a lot of these clients, they come into my office and they're like, oh, I was just people pleasing the therapist for the last 3 years. I was being a good client. And they'll come in and they'll be really nervous in the room with me that they're being a bad client. They're not doing therapy right. And I have to tell them, you can't do therapy wrong. If you feel like you're doing therapy wrong, that's the therapist's problem. That is not your problem. That means they need to be doing something different or they need to be referring you. So it's really this mentality that neurodivergence is something to be fixed rather than doing the trauma work, helping that person release their internalized ableism, move through the shame so they can start loving themselves and accepting themselves.
Yeah, that is interesting. Because, yeah, I mean, I've been in therapy several times, and I mean, for even personally, there's been times where it's like you go to the therapy appointment, and you're talking about stuff not even related to it, and it's like, did I just do that wrong? We didn't really talk about anything. But then, kind of being in the field a little bit, not in therapy specifically, part of it is just like sitting with the person and giving them a safe space to talk, and that's part of it too. So I mean, it is related. It's just sometimes you're like, we didn't really talk about anything
Yeah.
like deep that I should be fixing. It was just more just talking.
And that points to, I think, all therapists, we could have better communication with our
Yeah.
clients because for someone, they'd be like, oh, thank goodness I have a space. I can just
Yeah.
talk about whatever. Like that feels so good. And for you, you're like, I wish we could have kind of gone deeper or we could have talked about specific skills. And so it
Yeah.
might have been nice if your therapist had been checking in, which I always do in the first few sessions. And then every few
Sure.
months, I'm like, how's this going? Is this
Yeah.
balance of like skills and talking good? Do you want me to go deeper? And just figuring out what do you want, you know?
Yeah. For sure. What does neuro-affirming productivity look like?
Yeah, great question. So this is something I've been exploring a lot in the past couple
Mm-hmm.
weeks as I'm giving a talk to
Sure.
a STEM laboratory where I'm talking on the subject. What is neurodiversity affirming productivity? And kind of the place I've come to in this moment is that instead of the productivity being about like how many hours the person is working or if the productivity appears to be good or being done in quote the right way, it's more about does this person feel flow and feel ease as they're doing this work? Does this person leave that period of doing work feeling connected to themselves
Mm-hmm.
still, feeling a sense of accomplishment, feeling maybe, if not energized, at least a sense of just, okay, I still have some energy to do other things outside of maybe this job or this thing I was working on, such as like eating or some self-care, something like that, rather than leaving feeling burnt out or just done or like, oh, gotta wake up again and do it tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. My daughter, it's interesting now that I'm in this kind of having a daughter with a diagnosed disability, just in our society, how much emphasis is placed on how much somebody can contribute and like contribute in like specific ways, like, like you're saying, be productive, make money to pay their own bills and do everything themselves. It's interesting how it's so focused that way when it's not. You don't, I mean, I didn't really realize it until much later in life. And it's just, yeah, it's how do we, how, so with my daughter, like how she, she has trouble staying focused for long periods of time. So for me, I can most days sit if I need to 8 hours and make it through that. But like for her, she struggles with that. So how do you set up something where she can be quote unquote productive, and be true to her needs and what she needs to be able to, yeah, get through it without, like you're saying, be burnt out or stressed out or having trouble. So
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, I'm gonna zoom out for a
yeah.
second before I go to the specifics, which is in our society, even productivity has a huge bias, right?
Right.
Productive meaning a certain type of work, which
Yes.
is
Yep.
never emotional labor, which is never just being a good friend or just being a presence for someone.
Yep.
It's always actually defined as making money for yourself or for
Yep.
someone else.
Mhm.
So we have to start there. Like, she might be productive in many, many different ways.
Yes.
Might not look like what society, capitalism deems important. Yeah.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
then more specifically, there's, all right, what are the accommodations? Take breaks, spend half an hour doing whatever. If she needs to like move around and get in a different context or move her body or something, or just move her mind in some way, those are all great. And just kind of figuring out what's your ideal rhythm. For some people, it's kind of like 90 minutes is a good amount of time to pay attention. Then you take a half hour break, and then you do another 90 minutes, you take a half hour break. Or like maybe 4 hours a day is all she wants to or is able to pay attention to something. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just makes someone less money.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, even for me, I have not so much this job because it's like I'm doing co-facilitating groups, so it's a specific period of time. Like when you have like an 8 hour a day job where you have to show up, I mean, some days you like stretching stuff out, so like you don't ask for more stuff because then you have to do more, and then they once you do more, they want to give you more stuff, so you kind of you learn these little balancing acts of I'm
Yes.
okay sitting here kind of like spinning my wheels for an hour today till the end of the day, and it's so much of it's just kind of a myth, like it's just made
Yeah.
up almost, but still it's there, and you have to sit there for the 8 hours to get paid for that, and it's
Yeah, you're pointing to like
yeah,
you're good at appearing productive.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
interesting.
It's a privilege that you have, and it speaks to,
Yeah,
this concept of that I've really been diving into, of rather than, neurotypical people oppressing neurodivergent people, at least what Robert Chapman says in their book Empire of Normality, which I highly recommend to anyone who's
yeah,
more into that philosophical historical exploration of neurodiversity, um, that it's actually capitalists oppressing everyone. So if you're neurodivergent, you're oppressed in what we've been talking about, in that you get excluded, you don't feel like you belong. Maybe now you're poor because you're not able to make enough money to support yourself, and all of that, like that oppression. But for neurotypical people, or those people who can work and be productive, quote, in the way that capital society rewards, then they're, as Chapman says, ruthlessly exploited. You're going to be worked as hard as you can be worked. And
right,
guess what? That also leads to mental ill health, because
yeah,
stress is linked to mental ill
yeah,
health.
yeah, it's interesting. What did you say the book was called?
It's
Robert
called
Chapman.
Empire of Normality, Neurodiversity and
Okay.
Capitalism by Robert Chapman.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote that down. I'll have to look at it. Yeah, the whole capitalism thing is way more toxic, I feel like, than we give it credit for, or we talk about
Yeah. It's
needing more and more and more. Because even that, just like having a podcast, like I
yeah.
feel like the best in my body when I do it, just kind of how I want to do it. As soon as I start like seeing, different ways to do it, you got to put out 20 posts an episode and blah blah blah. And I'm like, why do I to grow your audience? I'm like, I don't want to do it that way. Or all these people that want you to pay money to get more views. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do it this way. And
Yeah.
I mean, the right people are going to find it. But once it's just so much drive to more and more and more and better, better, better all the time, it just gets exhausting after a while.
Yeah, 100%. There's this manufacturing of
Yeah.
like desire, manufacturing of consumerist needs, things that you're supposed to buy. And
Right.
what we all know is that doesn't actually make us happy. Like, you being
Yeah.
on that schedule, getting more of those followers
Yeah.
doesn't make you happy unless it's like a literal survival thing for you to make money. Then there's
Yeah.
going to be some happiness
Yeah.
correlation there. But
Yep.
other than that, we're just taught to want it. But
Right.
the things that bring us we've been taught these bring us happiness, but they
Mm.
don't. And the things that
Yeah.
do bring us happiness are you know conspicuously absent from our
Right.
environment, which makes us go to the consumerist thing, which, guess what, makes capitalists money.
Yeah. Sure. What are the biggest myths about neurodiversity that you wish would go away?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's funny, I'm like so steeped in the neurodiversity affirming world. Sometimes, like, I feel like right now I'm poking my head out to be like, what's going on over there again? Like, I'm surrounded by neurodivergent people now
Sure.
in my life, which is amazing. So, I mean, the biggest myth would be that neurodivergent people are broken or quote abnormal in some way, and that we're not good at socializing, or we're not good at paying attention, or all these things that are about like being bad or not good at something, rather than just difference. And I'll bring in the double empathy problem here for those who don't know what this is. A double empathy problem is just this notion that neurodivergent and neurotypical people communicate differently. But because neurotypical people have more privilege, they blame that on the neurodivergent person and say, you're bad at communicating. And so then a lot of neurodivergent people were figuring out, how do we get this privilege of being considered good at socializing according to neurotypical people? And that leads to masking, which is hiding who we really are, which is much research has been shown is linked to poor mental health outcomes. But what really has to happen is neurotypical people need to put in the effort to understand neurodivergent people. So rather than saying we're broken, just saying we're different, and then we're all just working to understand each other. Like we're talking two different dialects of a language. Let's figure out how to communicate.
Yeah, that makes sense. Plus, like, what really is normal, right? I mean, there is like,
Exactly.
Who is this person?
Well, you touched on something that I've also been learning about from that book, Empire of Normality, which is that the word normal didn't even exist till the 1820s. It's a 200-year-old word. We think that normal is like this timeless concept, but no, it was invented specifically with proto-capitalism and capitalism in mind, in the context of averages. Like the person who created it, Quetelet, was literally like, normal is the same as the average of a population. So the average of Britons, or the average characteristics of Swedes. And of course, he was measuring white middle-class men.
Yep.
So it's the word normal is inherently ableist, inherently racist, inherently sexist. And he equated normal with like perfection. And he literally wrote, if you're not normal, then you're a monstrosity. That's the origin of the word normal.
That's wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, this sounds like a really interesting book.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is your vision for a truly neuro-inclusive world, and how do we get there?
Yeah. Good question. And sometimes these questions feel kind of abstract to me, but I also really appreciate the opportunity to imagine what a world would look like, because if we can't imagine it, we can't move towards it. So a world that was truly inclusive would be one where everyone feels like they belong, and that there's not only room for them, but an appreciation of who they are and the unique being that they are, and qualities and traits that they bring to the people around them. And this would require, a lot of empathy and understanding from neurotypical people or able-bodied people towards those who are disabled or neurodivergent. It would require physically adjusting a lot of spaces to create sensory-friendly rooms, to create spaces where, someone in a wheelchair can actually navigate all of public society, which would have benefits for everyone if you want to look up the curb cut effect, people. And it would be a place where being different didn't mean that you were going to suffer the consequences of mental ill health or a lack of belonging.
That's great. What is one tip you can share to help the listeners be more inclusive today? So just something anybody can start doing today to be more inclusive.
Yeah. So I'd say, if there's someone in your life, like a relative, a student, a colleague, that you're like, you know what, that person's different from me in a way that I don't quite understand. Go find a first person account written by someone who shares that difference, whether it's a physical disability, cerebral palsy, or being autistic, and figure out what it's like from the inside out, so that you, instead of putting your neurotypical or your able-bodied perceptions onto what it's like for that person, you can understand from the inside out what it's like to be them and build that understanding, so that, like we talked about at the very beginning of the podcast, you can actually be inclusive by creating an environment where this person feels seen and a sense of belonging.
It's a great tip. Where's the best place for everybody to connect with you?
Yeah. So you can find me on my website, Divergent Paths Counseling. And if you want to book me for neurodiversity-affirming speaking engagements, workshops, consultations, you can go to divergentpaths with an S counseling.com/book Lila, spelled Lila.
Okay. I'll make sure I put those in the show notes. Ready for the last question?
Let's do it.
Do you like Spam lunch meat? Yes or no?
I haven't had it in over a decade, but the time that I did, I really loved it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I live near Austin, Minnesota, where the Spam Museum is located, and they make Spam. So I've been asking all my guests just to see what their reaction is.
Yeah. We put it in with rice and peas, and
Yep.
we cooked it. I was on a trip in Panama, and so we were just like off on the San Blas Islands. Like, we just brought our Spam with us, and it was great.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Aaron.
Yeah. To those listening, thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. It is truly an honor. Please join the podcast newsletter by clicking on the link in the episode description to keep up with the latest episodes. Together, we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.